Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're stepping into the shoes of a team leader and giving our operational engineering brains a much-needed structural software update. Listen, if you've ever stood on the garage floor or in the middle of a busy site, just totally surrounded by broken down machinery, missing parts, and absolutely impossible deadlines, well, you already know that managing the metal is really only half the job. The real challenge? Managing your own mind. So today we're going to look at exactly how we can systematically reframe that daily workshop chaos into manageable, logical puzzles, all to build a much more resilient crew. Let's get right into it. Here's our diagnostic manual for today. We'll start with the cognitive perception lens, then look at external friction, interpersonal friction, and internal friction. Finally, we'll wrap up with the Stoic Diagnostic Matrix and the final system rule. All right, Section 1. The cognitive perception lens. The whole foundation of this explainer is actually built on principles drawn from modern Stoicism, but specifically adapted for our heavy machinery environment. As you'll see in this machine specification, there's a critical truth we have to face. Our immediate knee-jerk interpretations almost always default to stress when machinery, spare parts, or schedules break down. But if we make a deliberate shift in our perception, it literally unlocks clear engineering logic, better team resilience, and a steady focus. Truly, how we frame the chaos entirely dictates our peace of mind. Now, take a look at this perception filter prism graphic. It perfectly illustrates a key point. An objective external event, like say a shipment delay, a nasty hydraulic leak, or a total schedule collapse, isn't inherently a crisis. It's really just a neutral fact until it passes through our mental prism. If we use the default perception you see at the top right, we react with instant frustration, kind of treating operational pressure like a personal attack from a chaotic universe. But what if we flip the switch to the deliberate shift at the bottom right? We pause, we view the problem objectively, isolate the variables, and basically treat the obstacle as a routine diagnostic puzzle. It's a total game changer. Moving on to Section 2, external friction, breakdowns and delays. Diagnostic 01 is something we're all too familiar with. The sudden, heavy asset breakdown. We've all been there, right? An unexpected project deadline is looming, and bam, a critical construction vehicle suffers a major failure right mid-operation. Instantly, our internal stress meter spikes to chaos. The default feeling is that everything just has to break down exactly when we have the absolute least amount of time. It really feels like the world is intentionally derailing our plans and killing our on-site momentum. But check out the stark contrast between letting that default perception run wild and actively choosing the deliberate stoic shift. If we stay on default, we're basically acting like victims of bad timing. The deliberate shift, though, completely reframes this failure. Think about it. Breakdowns are just the natural tax of operating high-wear, heavy systems. So instead of a disaster, this is simply a stress test. It's revealing exactly where our preventative maintenance cycles are fragile. Remember, as a leader, your job isn't to get angry. Your job is to isolate the root cause and fix it permanently. Now, Diagnostic 02 deals with severe spare parts and component delays. Imagine an international supply chain bottleneck totally locks up that specific replacement axle you desperately need. Our default reaction? We just see a broken pipeline and a completely ruined schedule. But getting angry isn't going to magically accelerate customs, is it? The deliberate shift means accepting that the delay is locked in. We can't change it. So we use this forced pause as an opportunity. The whole team can cross-train, we can overhaul our safety protocols, or we can support each other on structural prep work. So as we wrap up our toolbox talk on external friction, I want you to lock in these two workshop rules. First, do not view a structural or mechanical malfunction as a disruption to your path. Isolating the system fault and fixing it permanently is the path. Second, when a door is temporarily locked by outside logistical forces, use that pause to inspect, clean, and strengthen the room your team is currently standing in. All right, let's jump to Section 3, interpersonal friction, stakeholders, and feedback. Let's look at Diagnostic 03, the micromanaging manager. It's incredibly easy to see why our internal pressure gauge hits critical here. When someone repeatedly visits the garage floor, constantly questioning your ETAs and technical decisions, well, the default assumption is that they just don't trust your engineering judgment and want to make your life miserable. But if we want to manage this difficult conversation with a colleague or supervisor effectively, we have to change our approach. By shifting to a stable, deliberate diagnostic view, we suddenly realize it's rarely about us. As leaders, we need the emotional intelligence to see that they're likely just carrying deep, hidden anxieties about field timelines or financial pressures. Their scrutiny isn't a personal attack. Honestly, it's an open blueprint showing you exactly what clarity they're lacking. you can actually settle their anxiety with structured, proactive updates rather than throwing up an emotional defense. The exact same logic applies to Diagnostic 06. Picture an internal audit or an HSE inspector handing you an unpolished, blunt list of tool storage errors. Our default ego reacts super defensively. But look at this feedback X-ray graphic. It shows us that the deliberate shift means treating their blunt feedback like an objective scan. They've stripped away the pleasantries and just handed you a list of real structural weaknesses. Embracing this literally saves you weeks of slow performance before a major failure actually occurs. Go ahead and write these rules on your mental whiteboard for handling interpersonal friction. First, when you trade emotional defense for professional strategy, that micromanaging oversight actually becomes a clear roadmap for communication alignment. Second, always remember that while our ego demands empty praise, true operational progress demands absolute clarity. Welcome the blunt reality. It's what makes your crew's output bulletproof. Okay, section 4, internal friction, overwhelm, and learning. Diagnostic 4 highlights what happens when the fleet introduces, say, complex proprietary software or hybrid machinery that you have zero background in. The default panic immediately screams, "This is way too complex and I don't have time for this." But notice the equity graph here. See that dip into the red zone of friction and discomfort? The deliberate shift recognizes that feeling confused is actually data-driven proof that your brain is actively building new engineering pathways. Every single hour of that struggle is direct equity being added straight to your skill set. Now look at this backlog funnel. It visualizes a workshop floor completely flooded with down vehicles, preventative maintenance logs, and emergency repairs. The sheer volume makes it feel like the funnel is totally clogged, right? And our default state is to become completely paralyzed by the sheer weight of all those commitments. But instead of drowning in those commitments, we need to apply the deliberate shift. You reframe that massive, deep backlog not as some paralyzing burden, but as undeniable proof of operational trust and market opportunity. Think about it. They trust your crew to fix it. So you and your team simply pick the single most critical repair asset, execute it perfectly, and completely ignore the rest for that moment. You're moving from sheer panic to curated, single-focused action. The crucial takeaway for internal friction comes down to two main points. Number one, discomfort is not a sign of technical inability. It is literally just the sound of your mental and professional boundaries expanding. And number two, shift your focus from treating a massive backlog as a crushing burden to viewing it as the perfect space to practice dedicated, single-focused engineering. This brings us to section 5, the Stoic Diagnostic Matrix. This Stoic Diagnostic Matrix brilliantly abstracts all the chaos we've been talking about. On the left, we've got our friction types. Right in the middle is the trap, and over on the right is your way out, the deliberate shift. Take a good look at this matrix and ask yourself a quick self-reflection question. Which of these three traps, fighting reality, personalizing feedback, or fearing failure, do you tend to fall into the most on the floor? The beautiful thing is, the moment you identify your specific trap, you instantly know exactly which shift to apply. And finally, section 6, the final system rule. The final system rule is a powerful reminder that our day-to-day happiness isn't governed by having flawless machinery, perfect supply chains, or perfectly clean tracking sheets. I highly recommend turning this into a daily habit. Use it as a quick morning reflection exercise before you even step onto the workshop floor or into the office. Just remind yourself that joy, clarity, and true engineering resilience are active choices made in your mind, not a condition of the garage. Perception is and always will be your ultimate filter. I want to leave you with this absolutely incredible quote from the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. He said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." It's so powerful. In fact, for a simple group exercise to practice this resilience together, try asking your team this question during your next Toolbox talk. What current workshop crisis, delay, or impossible backlog could we reframe right now into our greatest engineering triumph today? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.